Hello, my beautiful, absolutely amazing risers and prosperity builders. I am Cindy Placide, and welcome once again to another edition of Poetry and Perspective with Placide. Now, before I go any further, I know I have viewers watching all over, so I am going to make sure that my viewers on Facebook and my other groups and everything can see me. So give me I will say that 1 second, about 5 seconds. That's still wrong. Okay. I don't know why I can't get it. Okay, I am back. Like I said, sweethearts, my sweethearts, I am from the beautiful Caribbean island of St. Lucia. I am a poet, author, advocate. I am, of course, your kind hostess. I advocate for autism, mental illness, suicide prevention. I also advocate for domestic violence, for pregnancy and child loss, and autism. My 2-year-old child was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2, and so I had to make a shift as to understand what it was, and then I became an advocate to help mothers like myself to understand and to be in acceptance of this cognitive disability. I also advocate for mental illness due to my own problems with mental illness. I was clinically diagnosed with PTSD, depression, chronic grief, anxieties due to my past traumas. And so I also advocate for suicide because I have tried to take my life a couple of times. And but I have grown from that, and I am a new person. My mental health is at a better place than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And I am happy to say that I have not had one thought of suicide. I also a mom who has lost children, and so I advocate for pregnancy and child loss. Among other things, I like to bring awareness to anything that is dear to anybody's heart that is going to be able to help the public, and so that the public could be educated about a lot of things. And tonight is no different. I have with me, before I bring my guest on, I have, like I said before, I'm from the beautiful Caribbean island of St. Lucia in the West Indies. Well, we say the East Indies. Let me see if I can find a map of my country. There it is, the beautiful Caribbean of St. Lucia. I am from that bottom part there, View Fort, okay? And I am live in the vicinity of Piero. That's where I am from. Beautiful little community, beautiful people, good food, people. You know, love my food, good food. And I am a poet. This is my first book. My first book is entitled When Life Stood in Silence, and that book was born from my grief, from my loss, and it was an autobiography in poetry, and I in there I just let out my deepest feelings. What my mouth couldn't say, the book could say for me. What I couldn't let out from the inside, my writing did it for me. So that's what When I Stood in Silence was. I was at a very low point. And my second book is entitled A Mighty Calm. The Mighty Calm is I'm an uprising from that grief, from that loss, to find myself, to find who I am, and to become a powerhouse from within. And it's not about money, it's not about anything else, but to build my strength as a woman from where I was. And my third book, I don't know why I don't have it up here, but I'm going to show it later. But my third book is entitled What the Skies Told Me. And guys, let me tell you, this is such a beautiful book. It is where I'm just carefree and I talk about life, and I find pleasure in life. I found meaning to my life again, and I let God's creation speak to me. The experiences that I've had speak to me, and I'm just in a beautiful state of mind. I'm happy. So, well, tonight, as I was saying, we have a beautiful lady. She's been here before, and I love her dearly. And I just clicked with her when we first met. So she is going to be talking to us today about a topic that is very dear to everybody's heart. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of this, but this month is Epilepsy Awareness Month. And I don't know if you know what epilepsy is. We're going to get into that later. But a lot of people suffer with epilepsy or seizures. And we are trying to bring more awareness to epilepsy. So without further ado, let me bring on my beautiful guest, Dr. Quarells. All my practice, and I
I
said,
know. It's okay. It's okay.
if I couldn't do it, if I couldn't do it justice, then I wouldn't say. How are you, Dr.
No
Quarells?
worries. No worries. I am just fine. I am fine and I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It is always a pleasure to be in your presence. It is always a pleasure to just hear you speak. And you have the most beautiful laugh. Yes. You see, both of us, listen, I've had a very long week. It's been tiring and I've been really tired. So for us to be able to laugh like this is
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So how are you doing?
I am good. I completely agree. It really has been a very long week, but we made it.
We
We've made
did.
it this far.
We did. And we thank God we did. We made it.
Yes.
So Dr. Raquel,
Yes,
did I say that?
ma'am.
I said, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So please tell us why you are here. But before I do that, audience, I am just so excited to have you, and I'm just all over myself. Listen, we're laughing because I practiced saying her first name and I did not get it, so I had to go to her last name. Yes, so please give you just a little bio about Dr. Raquel. Yes,
Sure.
yes, yes. I'm getting it, people. Let me just give you guys a little bio, your viewers a bio about Dr. Quarells, who she is, and what she's going to be talking about. So let me tell you. Dr. Raquel, oh my goodness, I am so proud of myself. Collins Quarles is a professor of community health and preventive medicine at the Morehouse School of Medicine. She received her PhD in psychology from Howard University in Washington, D.C. She's also a professor in the Rollins School of Public Health at the Emory University and a member of the Professional Advisory Board for the Epilepsy Foundation of Georgia. Now, Dr. Corres leads the epilepsy research team at MSM, which is Morehouse School of Medicine. She has received funding from federal and private sources for the work that she does in the epilepsy community. In 2014, funding from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention supported the MSM, of course, like I said, the Morehouse School of Medicine, sorry, and Emory research team to examine depression and self-management in Blacks with epilepsy. This funding also supported the establishment of the Epilepsy Community Advisory Board in 2015, and the Epilepsy Advisory Board is abbreviated E-CAB. The ECAB and MSM recently hosted several virtual community programs, including 20 to 2021. I think there's more now. Epilepsy Community Resource Services and Seizure Recognition and First Aid Certification Training. I hope I did that justice as well.
Yes, ma'am.
So, my dear friend, how are you? And tell us a little bit. I have just given them a little bio about you. You are looking at Professor Quarrels. Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself. I know the last time we briefly touched about it, about yourself, and then we're gonna get into a few questions based on your biography.
Um, I have been at Morehouse. It's hard to believe, but I've been at Morehouse since 2000, so 23 years. It's really, really hard to believe that I've been here that long. And I have been doing research um, since I started at Morehouse. I began doing research in cardiovascular disease prevention. that's where I started. But then in 2014, with a collaboration with a colleague at Emory, we began to do epilepsy research. Not much
Mhm.
research had been done in Blacks with epilepsy. And so that's what we sought to do, is to learn more about people who are living with epilepsy, families who are affected by epilepsy here
Mhm.
in Georgia. And so
Mhm.
we did that research, and that's when we started our ECAB, our Epilepsy Community Advisory Board, because um, I do community engaged research, which means that I look to get input from people who are living with the condition, whose um, lives are affected by the condition. So we started the Epilepsy Community Advisory Board to include people who have epilepsy, people who support people with epilepsy, as well as healthcare providers that treat people with epilepsy. And then lastly, community advocates. And so we started ECAB so that we could get that input and guidance for the research that we were doing in the epilepsy community back then.
Back there. As you can see, viewer, she's in her office. She's in her
I
quarters.
am.
She's still at work. This is a hardworking lady. Okay. Yes. So I know we've discussed epilepsy. We talked about epilepsy. Please tell the viewers what epilepsy is, and just elaborate a little bit on it as much as you can before I
Sure.
can answer the question. But you say that, let me just, before you answer, let me just say hello to my guest that is on right now. Nymphia Emmanuel is watching. So thank you for being on here and listening to Dr. Quarells and I talk about epilepsy. So go ahead, sweetheart. Tell the viewers what epilepsy is.
So, epilepsy is a brain disorder that's characterized by two or more unprovoked seizures. So, what we know is that people can have a seizure and not have epilepsy. So, people can have a seizure from fevers, from a drop in their blood sugar. So, there are a number of other conditions that may have someone have a seizure, but epilepsy is defined and characterized by people having two or more unprovoked seizures where we don't know when they're going to have a seizure, and sometimes we don't know why or where the seizures are coming from. And when we think about seizures, you can think of it as an electrical storm in the brain. Epilepsy is a medical disorder. Not, I think some people think of it as a mental health disorder, but it is not. It's a medical disorder, it's a brain disorder. And so it is, and these seizures that are occurring in the brain are what characterizes it. So people, and there are different types of seizures, which is important. And so I can get into that now or I can wait.
Before you get into that. So
Okay.
I have always heard that, I thought epilepsy was seizures, but you characterizing it differently. That you can have, many people can have one seizure, but when you have
It's
recurring.
multiple. Yes.
Oh,
So having just one seizure, that may be due to something else, not epilepsy.
wow.
And then it's also important to know that, there is a condition that we call psychogenic PNES, psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, where people will have seizures that are not based on something going on in the brain, but some psychosomatic um, condition that are leading to the seizures.
Okay.
So with epilepsy, you need to be able to, it comes from a activity in the brain. And
The-
and if the activity in the brain, if the activity, these seizures aren't coming from activity that's happening in your brain, then it may be due to something else, not epilepsy.
wow. Wow.
So it's which is why, and it's sometimes difficult to diagnose epilepsy because usually when people have a seizure, or often when people have a seizure, they have no memory of it. And if we don't, if when you have this seizure and you can't characterize it, then it's hard for your provider to be able to pinpoint either where it happens in the brain and make sure that it is epilepsy and not something else.
Wow. So, whew, I'm learning something new right here. So let me see. I have one of my guests. We're gonna have questions and comments. So my guest said, Katrina Williams. She said my ex-husband had it. It was a pain. His was both. I don't understand. Born formed. I don't understand what I mean. But she said with multiple seizures, anytime, any place.
You can have seizures anytime, any place. And well, you know, one of the sayings that Epilepsy Foundation of America uses is that anyone with a brain can have a seizure. So know that, be clear on that, that it's not limited to someone, to their age, to their race, their gender, none of that. Anyone with a brain can have a seizure. So at any age, anytime, yeah, it's just a matter of characterizing and understanding what is the source of that seizure.
Okay.
Because someone whose blood sugar drops, someone with diabetes, or someone whose blood sugar drops, they may have a seizure. We know that babies can have febrile seizures, which is a seizure from their fever going too high.
Mm.
So there are different reasons and are different causes of seizures, but those seizures that it's the unprovoked nature where you
Mm-hmm.
can't predict it, but you know that another one may occur, that's when you're getting into epilepsy.
Epilepsy. So can they be life-threatening, those seizures?
Absolutely, they can be. So we know of something called SUDEP,
Mm-hmm.
sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And
Okay.
SUDEP happens when someone, excuse me, has a
Mm-hmm.
seizure and dies unexpectedly, and it's not due to any other condition.
Oh,
Also, people who have multiple seizures back to back are at a risk of death. Status epilepticus is a condition where the seizure activity doesn't stop, and that puts them at risk of death as well.
that's scary.
It is. It is. There have been a couple of people who have died due to their seizures. A couple of famous people who have died due to their seizures in the last couple of years.
Wow. So take us into epilepsy now. So we know that one seizure, a couple of seizures, but take us into epilepsy. Joycelyn Martin is watching. Hi, Joycelyn.
Oh, hi, Jocelyn. Jocelyn is one of our Epilepsy Community Advisory Board members.
And I was introduced to
Yeah.
Raquel by Joycelyn. So thank you for being on, Joycelyn. Really appreciate you coming on here. Yes. So we are we're moving from seizures now, because now we understand that you can have seizures, for any reason, but multiple reasons. I can say any for multiple reasons. And when it starts to be constant, like a series of seizures, then we get into epilepsy. So tell us a little bit more about epilepsy, and go in depth into what it is for us.
So, epilepsy is a really challenging condition. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just imagine if you have seizures and you don't know when the next one's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so people who are living with epilepsy have the challenge of going out in public. If you imagine going out in public, going to the store, and the potential for you to have a seizure out at Walmart,
Mm-hmm.
and not knowing how people are going to react. to your having a seizure? Will they know what to do? Will someone help you if you have a seizure when you're out in public? That is a very scary prospect. And one of the reasons why we are trying to, one of the goals of the Epilepsy Community Advisory Board is to really raise awareness about epilepsy so that people will understand it. There are a number of misconceptions about epilepsy. People still think that a seizure is, or epilepsy is contagious, that people have, that it's a demon when they have a seizure. There are a number of misconceptions about epilepsy. And so our goal really is to raise awareness. And this whole epilepsy, being November, Epilepsy Awareness Month, is to hopefully raise awareness about epilepsy. It's an invisible disease. You can't look at somebody and tell that they may have a seizure in the next 5 minutes.
True. I may be sitting here in the next 5 minutes, boom, depending
You
on what's
don't
happening.
know. You can't tell if someone has epilepsy. You can't look at them and tell. So it really is an invisible disability for people who are having uncontrolled seizures.
Wow. So I've heard, like you mentioned, about some of the myths. I know I've heard. I had somebody on here on we were speaking about um autism, and the gentleman told me that in Africa, because I interviewed him from Africa, he's a psychologist in Africa,
Mhm.
and then he told me it is sad how, especially the religious, most of the religious community looks down on children with autism, and those who have those, these conditions, they think it is demonic,
Mhm.
that it is satanic. So I know there are a lot of stigmas associated with epilepsy. Could you please elaborate on what are some of those stigmas, and what has been done to? I know you bringing awareness to that, but what have been done to counteract those stigmas? The stigmas.
It really is all about education and
Mm-hmm,
educating our community
mm-hmm,
about what epilepsy is. You know,
mm-hmm,
the because of the stigma, and let me just say, someone having a seizure, it is scary to watch, depending on the type of seizure that they have. If they have a tonic-clonic seizure, which is what people normally think of when you think of a seizure, the convulsing and shaking, falling to the ground,
mm-hmm,
that is scary to watch. And so when you have a seizure and people don't know what to do, how to respond to it, how to help you, they may then just kind of back off. And so it's isolating if people are scared
mm-hmm,
of you having a seizure. And so our goal is really to raise awareness so that people understand that it is a medical, it's a brain disorder.
mm-hmm,
And there's treatment available, but sometimes people still have seizures, um, even while being treated. And there are a number of different treatments available. Most people are on medications, and most people are controlled with medication. Their seizures are controlled with medications. But then there are some that may respond better to a device. There are devices that can be implanted to control their seizures.
mm-hmm,
And they're also having brain surgery. If you can pinpoint, if the doctors are able to pinpoint exactly where the seizure is starting,
mm-hmm.
then they may be able to take that piece of the brain out, and then seizures are no more.
Wow.
And so, yes, that can be a scary thought, to have brain surgery and have a piece of your brain removed that's causing the seizures. But when you kind of weigh the odds in
Mm-hmm,
terms of having seizures every day, every week, versus removing a small piece of your brain, and we know that um, you can relearn things and go on to have a normal life after having brain surgery. And
Mm-hmm.
and to have a normal life seizure free is an incredible change in the quality of your life. So exploring what are all of the options available for treatment, there have been so many amazing advances in science and in medicine to help people who have epilepsy and who have seizures regularly. That it's, I mean, where we are now, and we're still advancing and
Mm-hmm.
learning ways to control seizures.
Okay. Now I know you were on the board of you're on the board of Epilepsy Advisory Board, right? And I know I'm sure that the board is taking a lot of measures to make sure that the public is aware of a lot of things that has to do with epilepsy. Now, what tell us about the board, what it does, and what was your driving force to get into that research?
Ah, so, what got me into the research was a colleague from Emory who approached me and asked me about working together on a research study. She had been doing epilepsy research for some years,
Mm-hmm.
and she approached me. We were connected through my chair, the chairperson of my department here at Morehouse School of Medicine. And she asked if I was interested in collaborating with her on a research study that focused on epilepsy and blacks in epilepsy. And I knew that she had developed an intervention that looked to address depression in people with epilepsy. Because
Mm-hmm.
what we also know is that depression is very high in people with epilepsy. Almost 1 in 2 people have epilepsy. 50%, that's a lot, have depression, of people who have epilepsy, compared to 16% of the general population who have depression. So depression is very high. It's actually the most common psycho psychiatric comorbidity for people with epilepsy. And
Mm-hmm.
then right on its heels is anxiety. Because as you can imagine, the fear of when is the next seizure going to happen, that would create some anxiety and also some depression.
Yes, and I'm thinking they may be wondering, am I gonna ever gonna have a normal life from having
Yep,
epilepsy? And
yep,
based on the point that you made earlier, Joycelyn said her mother got at 86, she got her first seizure. So imagine
yeah.
living all your life,
Mhm.
never had one seizure, and at 86.
So, what we do know is the two groups that develop epilepsy at the highest rate are children and older adults. After a seizure, people are more likely to develop epilepsy. And so that's where the older adults come in, but then children are also the highest group to develop epilepsy. But the thing is, when you think about, say, someone in their 30s or even in their late 20s, they've lived most of their life and are just starting their career, and they develop epilepsy and they're having seizures, they cannot work or they're discriminated against and are fired, which is
Mhm.
against the law to fire them because they have epilepsy. According to the American Disabilities Act, there are accommodations that they could try, but oftentimes, because people, and we've heard from a number of people who have been unfairly fired from their jobs because of their epilepsy, where the companies weren't willing to accommodate them. So if you have epilepsy, you shouldn't be climbing up on ladders. So there should be another position somewhere. There are
Exactly.
also a number of companies, I must say, there are also a number of companies that do make accommodations, and that actually there are companies that are working with the Epilepsy Foundation of Georgia to hire people with epilepsy because it doesn't.
I like that. I didn't see
Apple. It's Apple. The new
it.
innovations in Apple that
This is too cute. He like thumbs up. Y'all
yeah,
didn't see that?
yeah,
Thumbs
right.
up.
We have to be careful. And
Yeah.
look, I do sign language, and so I use my hands a lot to talk. And but
Yeah.
with Apple now, I've got to keep my hands down.
Oh my goodness. So it is sad because I mean we cannot say when we are going to get sick. We cannot just we cannot predict that.
No,
And so for someone to be discriminated against because they got sick and they lose their job, I think that's so wrong.
it
Because
is.
then, without cutting it short, because then it adds on to the depression, and that's why you hear a lot of people sometimes they take their lives because I'm dealing with this illness. This probably the job is the one thing that keeps me together, and you take that away from me. What's left?
Mhm, mhm. It's I it when I say that it's a very challenging condition, it really is. And so part of what the Epilepsy Community Advisory Board is doing is to really not only raise awareness about epilepsy, but then also provide resources available for people with epilepsy. And actually, quite honestly, the resources that we are sharing with the community are resources that are available for people with disabilities, people with mental illnesses. But we wanted to make sure that people with epilepsy are aware of resources that are available for them and that can perhaps improve their quality of life. You know, from there are many different organizations that are in we're in Georgia that are in Georgia that have support services available to help people. We've partnered with not only the Epilepsy Foundation of Georgia, who has a um, what is their EF Works program that looks to support people with epilepsy and help them to, if they need to shift to a different career, that helps them to shift, look at their skill set, and help them to move to a different career if necessary. But then there's also organizations like Disability Link that has many programs for people with disabilities. We've also had virtual sessions in our epilepsy community resource series. We've had sessions where we've had civil rights attorneys come in and talk about the American Disabilities Act, so people know their rights
Mhm.
and know what their companies, their employers are allowed to do and what
Mhm.
they aren't allowed to do.
Mhm.
So our goal as Epilepsy Community Advisory Board is to equip, empower the epilepsy community with resources that can improve their quality of life.
And I think this is really important that they get those resources,
Yes.
uh, because, like any illness, who is dealing with whatever they're dealing with individually
Mhm.
is burdensome to them. And so, for you to lose that hope, it is important that you have people who are working with you and to support you with whatever conditions that you're going through. And sometimes people don't know what you go through unless you tell them, unless they see it.
That's very true. So, and I'm glad you brought that up because most people with epilepsy have never met another person with epilepsy. And they don't always even share it with their family that they have it
Mhm. Mhm.
because of this negative stigma, because people don't really understand what epilepsy is. So there's this fear of it. And so, and then if there's depression, then you've got the double stigma. Because as you know, in our communities, we aren't as open and we don't share our mental health struggles.
Mhm.
And more of us have that struggle than not, and it's amazing. It would be amazing if we shared more how we could support each other more, and we won't feel as alone in this struggle.
Mhm.
And so it's, it's just, it's unfortunate that the stigma associated with mental illness, as well as the stigma associated with epilepsy, prevents people from getting support that would enhance and improve their quality of life. Like you were saying, you know, to be supported in whatever conditions you have really is important.
It is. I was listening to I was listening to my friend. He had a session. He's been in radio for the longest, and he was interviewing this gentleman from, I think, Jamaica, and they were talking about colon cancer. Is it colon cancer? That's what men have, or prostate? I can't
Prostate,
remember.
prostate. If you're talking about men, it's prostate. Both
But
men and women can get
I,
colon.
I think it's one of the topics they were
It's
talking about. I
prostate,
can't remember. But
probably
what
prostate.
he was saying was that a lot of times the stigma behind men, in particularly, you've heard men talking about they're going to see the doctor and then they're pushing something up their rear,
The test.
and so men do not want to face that, and they have that fear that somebody else is going to know that they went through that. And they were so open, about it, and the gentleman was saying we need to stop stigmatizing those things that are important to us, for us to do, those things that needs to be brought, awareness needs to be brought to. We hiding it. It's not doing anybody good. It's doing us a disservice when we hide stuff. And I could take you from my own examples.
Yeah.
I hid a lot. As much as I was I was talkative. I hid a lot
Mhm.
until I got to the point where I couldn't take anymore, and then I was everything just flared up. So it is important that we need to bring awareness to things like epilepsy, mental illness, autism. A lot of people are this in the 20. Are we in the 21st century? Yes. 20, I was
Yes.
in the 21st century, we have modern cars, modern this and modern that. Yet still the most important things that needs to be at the forefront, we are
Mhm.
still afraid of talking about them. We have stigmas about them.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, part of it is also this lack of education.
Yeah.
One of the things we learned from our research study was that the community doesn't know about epilepsy. They don't understand it. There's not enough education around epilepsy, which is also why we host seizure recognition and first aid certification.
Mm-hmm.
So people can get that. You can get that at epilepsy.com. It's available. We just held a session 2 weeks ago, where I led, me and another member from our Epilepsy Community Advisory Board, led a seizure recognition and first aid certification. But it is available on epilepsy.com. It's available on demand, and it's available to join a virtual class. But the beauty of this training is it does share with people the different types of epilepsies, the different types of seizures, educating the community about that there are more than one type of epilepsy, that there are several types of seizures is important so that you can recognize when someone next to you may be having a seizure. You don't know if the person next to you is daydreaming, or are they having a seizure?
And that
Because
was gonna be
seizures
my
can
next
look that
to
way.
you was I was gonna be my next question to you. How do we know when somebody's having a seizure? Because I'm sitting there thinking, if my son was having a seizure, how would I know?
And that's the thing. There are different types. And so that's the beauty of the Epilepsy Foundation's course, Seizure Recognition and First Aid, because we
Mhm.
show you videos of what seizures look like. And some seizures, it's just someone staring off in space. And
Wow.
so teaching people how to recognize a change in someone's behavior that could be a seizure, and then how to respond to that, how best to respond to that and help that person and make sure that they are safe.
Mhm. I'm writing at epilepsy.com. So just
Yes.
continue. So let me put the
Okay.
information on there, right?
Yes. Epilepsy.com is the Epilepsy Foundation of America, the national organization. That's their website. And they have so much information about epilepsy on their website. So much. It's a really great resource.
Yeah, I put it on there, epilepsy.com. That's correct, right?
Yes,
Yes, yes.
epilepsy.com.
Like you said, we have always heard that knowledge is power. And if we don't know, there's no way we are going to be able to help someone. So in order for us to be able to teach and to educate, we first ourselves have to learn. And then we are able to educate others and bring awareness to those things that
Yes.
are plaguing us. And I am telling you, my viewers, when I first heard about epilepsy, I was taken aback to know. And what got me, Dr. Quarrels, was that when I thought about my neighbor who was nonverbal at the time, he could not speak.
Mm,
How would he be able to tell me what should I look for?
mm, mhm, mhm,
And
mhm.
that, and I was waiting for when somebody is gonna approach me and tell me about epilepsy again, because I really want to. I have seen somebody have a seizure. I remember when my brother died, my last brother, his girlfriend, then girlfriend, his common law wife, was at the funeral, and
Mhm.
she was having a seizure.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes, and that freaked me out.
Yeah.
I knew that she was on seizure medication. I knew
Mm,
that she was, dealing with seizures. But for me to actually see it live,
mhm.
that was scary.
It is. It's a scary thing to witness, particularly the tonic-clonic seizures. It's a
Mm,
scary thing to witness, and so being equipped to know how to respond to it is
mhm,
really what's important, and that's why that seizure recognition first aid
mhm,
training is so important. And when you were talking about, I think about my own family.
mhm.
After I started doing epilepsy research, and I was talking to my dad about the research that I was doing, and then he was like, "Yeah, I used to have seizures when I was a child." Wait a minute, never mentioned that to me before,
Yes.
ever. And
Wow.
that's, I mean, and that just really brought it home that we don't talk about it in our families.
We keep
I
it low.
never heard that before. He had never mentioned that. He was like, "Well, I had fits. I mean, they stopped. So, why bring it up?"
Wow. Joycelyn
And
said that her mother got the seizure from a
after
and
having a stroke.
stroke, and I'm just reading the comments now. She said that her sister was fired from kindergarten or first grade because she had an epilepsy.
Yep. We've heard from many people who have lost jobs, even in education. We had a board member who taught special ed, and they fired her. Special ed. where
Yes.
kids are possibly have
Yes.
seizures, and yeah,
Yes.
and they fired her.
Oh, that's sad.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, because it's not that she couldn't do the job, it's that she had seizures and she wasn't having them every day, all day, but they were scared of the possibility of her having a seizure while at school.
So you scared you see something like that. Why didn't you inquire? When I see stuff like that, it gives me, and not everybody is the same, but it gives me such a fire to learn more. Such a
But
fire.
like you said, it's a scary thing to watch.
Yes.
And so, unfortunately, not everyone responds in that way of curiosity. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. We recently had our Public Health Institute with the Epilepsy Foundation, and
Mm-hmm.
one person was sharing how she had seizures growing up, and at her school, seizures were normalized. Oh, she has seizures. Yeah, she's fine. She's fine now. She you know, because seizures, they last 2 to 3 minutes, sometimes only seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And so, depending on how we respond, that's this where the stigma comes in. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was such a beautiful thing that the school was educated, the kids were educated on seizures. So then when their friend had a seizure, they weren't shunning her or afraid of her. They
Mm-hmm.
supported her.
Yes.
Imagine the difference in that environment versus an environment where, you know, they have the kids all leave the room, and so the kids are even more scared of it, and then are pushing the person away because something must be wrong with you if they made us leave the room.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Imagine how that child felt in school versus the child over here who
Mm-hmm.
the class was taught about it and learned how to support their friend.
Wow. Now,
Yes.
when your dad asked you, when your dad told you that he had seizures, how did that make you feel knowing that this is what you were embarking on?
It brought it home. I had been hearing from people on our community advisory board and people in the community
Mm-hmm.
about this stigma with epilepsy and the fact that people don't share even
Mm-hmm.
with their family members that they have epilepsy. And I was like, oh my God, it just confirmed it for me that family members don't even share that they have epilepsy. And then
Wow.
I learned after that I have a little cousin that has actually two little cousins that have epilepsy.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it wasn't until I started talking about epilepsy that
Mm-hmm.
I learned about them. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like it was put out there to the family that they have epilepsy. So,
Hold on. If you see me moving my head, my autistic son is right now. That's the time he wants to go make his dinner. So, so
okay. Okay.
I'm gonna be muting myself because he's on his business.
Well, and look, he's like looking at the clock. It's time.
Yeah.
He's probably like, it's time.
Yes. Usually it's earlier, but he's on his own thing, doing his own thing right now. So yes. Noah, can you turn your voice down a little bit, baby? Because mommy's on the live, okay? Can you do that for me, please? Good boy. Yes, so I think honestly, and that's my opinion, honest opinion, I feel that if more people spoke up, we would have known and the statistics would have been higher. There are a lot of people who are hiding things and they just don't want to talk about it. And that's why it is important that we use our voices to bring those people out, to bring them out into the force, to make them understand. And I always say this on the show, you are not alone.
No,
It
no,
is a
no.
very lonely place to be alone. Imagine that.
It
Lonely.
is. Well, and think about this. Think about this statistics. 1 in 10 people will have a seizure in their lifetime. 1 in 10. And then 1 in 26 people will have epilepsy, will develop epilepsy. So when you think about a class of students, usually about 30 people, at least one will have epilepsy.
Don't think it cannot happen to you because you think you're healthy.
Anyone
So,
with a brain, anyone with a brain can
and
have a seizure.
that's all of us people. Risers, that's all of us. All of us have brain. Oh my goodness. That is very scary. For those of you, listen, for those of you viewers who gonna be watching this live, the replay of this live, understand you are not immune to getting a seizure. Dr. Raquel said, anyone with a brain. Now I know we know walking around us. Anyone with a brain can get a seizure. I want you to think about that for a second.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
could be any imbalance in your system can give you a seizure. And if that imbalance is bad enough, I'm not a doctor, but I'm thinking
Well,
if
or I mean, the number one cause of epilepsy is traumatic brain injury. But there are a lot of people that we don't know why they have epilepsy, what caused it. But you could, a number of people have had a car accident or some type of traumatic brain injury that can lead to them having epilepsy. And that's why we think of that connection between stroke and epilepsy.
that's what I was about to say. As you said that, it took me back to Joyce who said her mother got it from a stroke.
Yep.
So what about those people who have not had a stroke
Mhm.
and have seizures?
It could, I mean, there are a couple of different causes, but we don't always know. It could be, something that they were born with, something developmental. It could be a brain tumor. It could be, that, some traumatic accident that affected their brain.
So
But
probably
there's
that's
also
what
a good number that we don't know why. It's unknown cause.
so probably that's what my friend Katrina was saying. Her husband, he was born, probably he was born with it
Some some
because
are.
there was a typo error. So I'm thinking, based on what you're saying, probably he was born with it.
He may have been. Or genetics. There's also genetics involved. There are some genes that we know are connected with some very rare forms of epilepsy. So there are a number of different causes of it that, so there's no one pinpoint. The big thing that we know, the most common cause of epilepsy is the traumatic brain injury.
Wow. So my cousin is a hypochondriac. He's a hypochondriac. He's
Hypochondriac who,
if he sees this show, he will have anxiety.
sorry.
That's okay. But it's important that we learn it.
But here's the thing. I mean, people with epilepsy are living normal lives. It's not a death sentence.
Because I remember the other lady that I met, what's her name?
Natalie, who
Natalie. Yes.
started Angels with Epilepsy.
Yes.
Yes, and is living her life and going around the country speaking about epilepsy. So, no, it is definitely not a brain. I mean, not a death sentence. We also have another member of our board, Paula Moreland, who is volunteering. She's heading up food distributions in her hometown of Eatonton. She is leading all kinds of activities here in Georgia. So, no, by no means is epilepsy a death sentence. There are many people with epilepsy that are living very full lives.
Now, Jocelyn said something right here, and she made a very that made a very impactful. A light bulb went in my head. She was very impactful. She said, "My sister got a fall as a baby, and the doctors believe that was the cause. Now, when we associate that with brain injury, from a very sometimes a baby fall, we may not think too much, or the baby fell, the baby's a baby, they'll fall, they'll do things, but these things can that can start from that there on.
Well, I think it depends on the type of fall.
Yeah, true.
So, children fall all the time and it's not doesn't result in brain injury.
Yes.
So it depends on the type of fall. It has to be traumatic brain injury
Mm.
when we think of a cause for epilepsy. So depending on how serious that fall was.
So I have a question because I'm like when you talking and I'm getting so I have a burning question.
Okay.
I have a friend of mine in California, and it's graphic. She was beaten by her mate. She's been on my show before. She was beaten by her mate with a hammer to the head, and her brain matter was on the floor. She lost one eye, and this lady is a as you were talking about that just she is a survivor of domestic violence. She lost her eye. What are the chances for her? Because that was traumatic.
And that is a brain injury. Yes, absolutely. She could develop epilepsy. Yeah.
She
Oh,
has
man.
been through so much.
Wow.
She was just in Atlanta like this past weekend. But she is one
God,
of the strongest women I know.
God bless her.
When
That
she came on here and tell her story, I was boohooing like a baby. And now that you're talking about traumatic brain injuries can cause seizures. Okay. All right. I'm getting that.
mm,
I don't want to get too emotional. I'm gonna get emotional.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, there are and well, so traumatic brain injury is one. And what I was surprised to hear is that so many people that I've talked to who have epilepsy had several car accidents
Mm-hmm.
before they were diagnosed with epilepsy. Because
Okay.
remember, you don't always know what happened during a seizure. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a seizure, you're unconscious. And if that happens while you're driving, that puts you at risk. And let me share something really neato with you.
Okay.
I recently did an interview with a guy who has a car show on WAOK.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there are new cars that are coming out that will be able to monitor the driver to see if they are conscious, and if they are not conscious, incapacitated, the car will notice that and pull the car over and call 911.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. How amazing is that? Think about that and how that can save, how many lives that may be able to save.
Yes.
That it will notice if the driver is no longer conscious and pull the car over safely and call for help. And
Wow.
I mean, right now, he was telling me that he was testing out a car that noticed how your eyes are being on the road. And if you were too distracted, the car would shake you. Like if you're falling asleep or talking to someone, the car would shake or make audible noises or something to get your attention back to the road.
Wow.
New developments
Oh,
in
yeah.
technology to save lives.
Yes. So, what are some of the other you are on the virus as we I'm thinking about what to say. You are on the advisory board for epilepsy in Georgia. So, what are some of the different initiatives that the body's coming up with to be able to help better, to help the community better with, coping with epilepsy, and probably some new, maybe a new invention or
We don't have any new
something?
inventions or anything,
Just
but
kidding. But what are some of the initiatives that you have coming up? That is gonna better help people in the Georgia community to help with epilepsy.
so we are at the end of our year, and we are thinking through kind of what of our plannings
Mm-hmm.
for our epilepsy community resource series for next year.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended it with seizure first aid certification 2 weeks ago. This during Epilepsy Awareness Month, and so right now we are in the midst of deciding what we are going to do for next year. We know that we want to talk about the treatment options that are available for
Mm-hmm.
people with epilepsy. Um, we recently had a session that focused on transition
Mm-hmm.
from pediatric to adult care, which is a really challenging thing for people. And I think that it's not limited to
Mm-hmm.
epilepsy. When your child becomes 18 and needs to go to adult care,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're ready or not, that transition happens. And as a parent, you may at 18, your access to their medical records changes, and so helping families to transition from and when to start that, that it's important to start that. The experts that we had on the call were saying that you start having that discussion starting at 12.
Wow, 12 years old.
Starting at 12, where the child knows what their condition is. Do they know what medicines they're taking? And you've got to really you've got to do this based on your child. Know where your child is, but they're saying starting it so that by the time they get to 16, that they are able to have dialogue with the healthcare provider, that they can ask questions and feel comfortable asking questions on their own and not relying on mom or dad to talk to the provider for them. So starting to slowly transition them is important, because when they move over to adult care, it's a different world.
I
And
can I can totally relate to that because as an autistic parent, I started having a conversation with Noah, so he understands now at his age, what his medications are. He's still trying to get to understand and uh, what his condition is. But I'm already having conversations with different teachers and education to help him understand when he's turning 18 what is going to happen from then on.
yeah, I have to say I wasn't expecting that I couldn't get into my child's my chart, that I couldn't get into his medical records right when he turned 18. I had that access, and in Georgia, the child has to give you access. I think once they turn 16,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's their medical record, even though you're the parent, it's theirs, and I know they have to give you permission and give you access to their medical record. But then I was surprised that when my son turned 18 just this past summer, that all of a sudden my access was gone. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going on?
I know your heart broke, right?
You know? And the same thing with my daughter, who has, it's when you're thinking through, whatever medical conditions your children have, making sure that they're able, because after 18, one of her doctors wouldn't let me talk to them. They were like, no, you have to go through her to talk to
Mhm.
me.
Wow.
And it's the same thing with the schools.
Yes. Yes. For the first time since my son started his IEP for the first time, he was on the IEP, and I said, "Ooh, that's a shift. That's a
It's
shift."
I mean, it's a sign that they're growing.
Yes.
And something else that we shared with um, our community is the
Mm,
difference between pediatricians and adult care um, physicians. That pediatricians are really comprehensive, more
mm,
comprehensive in their care, and in terms of they may work with you in terms of mental health, they may work with you in terms of rehabilitation, or all of that. They're more comprehensive, whereas you go to adult care and they're like, I do seizures. If you need something related to mental health, you're going to have to go to somebody else for that. And if
mhm,
you need something separate from, for the epileptologist, they're
mhm,
like, we focus on epilepsy. Any other condition, you need to go to someone else for that. Whereas the pediatrician may have been willing to work with the parents on a little bit of everything. And
mhm,
they talked about the it's funny to hear the adult care physicians talk about pediatricians as being superheroes because they're doing a little bit of everything, whereas the adult care people were focused
on that
on
one
their
thing.
specialty. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Wow. So since you were speaking, that question came to my mind. So, at what age is the seizure or epilepsy more dangerous?
It's any age. It's not one particular. It's any age.
That
It
makes it even more scary.
It is. It is. Any age that, just like anyone can have a seizure, anyone, is at risk. Well, it's not anyone that's at risk of death. It's people who have uncontrolled seizures are at a higher risk of death. But SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, that we don't know why. We don't know who may die from a seizure with SUDEP.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, what are the you said that I think in your bio we mentioned that you were in the Black community. You started to talk about seizures in the Black community, and that was one of the things that you were working on, right? So
And depression.
yes. So what are the why am I biting my tongue today? Okay, let me take that back. What are the statistics of epilepsy and seizures in blacks compared to other races?
So, what we have learned and what we know in terms of the literature are that the prevalence of active epilepsy, or lifetime prevalence of epilepsy, of having epilepsy, is
Mm,
higher in blacks than in whites. Um, Active seizures, the challenge is with blacks are more likely to be diagnosed and receive their treatment in an emergency room, as opposed to having access to a specialist like an epileptologist who specializes in epilepsy, who are neurologists. They're brain doctors, neurologists who
mm,
specialize in epilepsy. That's an epileptologist.
mm-hmm.
And so blacks are less likely to be under the care of an epileptologist, or even, unfortunately, a neurologist, a specialist. They're
Yeah.
less likely, and they are more likely to receive their care in an emergency room,
And
and a diagnosis in an emergency room than with their
yeah,
provider.
hold on.
Yeah. And well, and while you're doing that, I'll just share that one of the goals of the work that we were doing, the research that I did, which was focused on depression in people with epilepsy, what we found was that the intervention, which is Project Uplift, was successful in reducing blood pressure and reducing seizures. No, not seizures. Look, I'm getting distracted. Was successful in reducing depression in people with epilepsy.
What telling you?
So, Project Uplift was successful in reducing depression in people with epilepsy. And what we also, what Nancy found in her research is that it also reduced seizure frequency, which was unexpected. But depression is so powerful that if we can help people to get their depression under control.
Hold on, there was static, so I had to mute that.
Okay.
There's a lot of static. I don't know where it's going.
Is there still static?
Go ahead. Let me see. When you speak it, I hear it.
Okay. Okay. So it's just that depression is, as I said earlier, depression is higher in people with epilepsy. And so we need to have that depression addressed.
Yes.
Because you can improve their life outside of epilepsy if depression is under control. So we saw that what Nancy saw in her studies was that if you reduce their depression, you also reduce their seizure frequency.
Wow.
And so part of that may be
connected.
Say that again.
It's interconnected. So one is going to complement each other.
Well, and think about it, depending on how they're dealing with their depression, are they more likely to miss medications, which is the biggest trigger to have a seizure?
Mm-hmm.
And and are they're more likely to not engage in those important self-management behaviors. So are they more likely not? If they're not engaging in the self-management behaviors, then they're going to be more likely to be in danger of having a seizure. So that's the challenge.
I'm sorry. I had to put your solo on because you were in my face.
I understood.
So, I mean, I could go on and on about questions because I like to ask questions because it helps me learn. But I know you have to go, but I'm going to ask you this. So, I know I advocate for, we talked a little bit about depression, which is part of mental health, right? So let me see if I can phrase that in the way that I want to ask without asking it in the wrong way. Is there a high probability that someone with experiencing prolonged epilepsy, like, they continue, the epilepsy is bad, that they get into a state of depression where they end up committing suicide? So what are the probabilities of suicide with someone with epilepsy?
So we know that suicide ideation, thinking about suicide, is much higher in people with epilepsy, and completed suicide is higher in people with epilepsy. Yeah, which is another reason why we need people to address the depression. Depression has to be treated. And what is also recommended is that every during the doctor's appointments for the epilepsy appointments, people should be screened for depression.
I agree.
Yeah. I agree. Because depression is so high in this community, everyone should be screened for depression. And then, so not just screen and stop, but screen and treat it for the depression.
Wow. As much as people with epilepsy can lead a normal life, I can see how taxing it can be on the mental health.
Very challenging condition. Very challenging. It's challenging not just for the person with epilepsy, but it's
The
challenging for the
caretaker,
family too.
the caretakers, yes,
Yeah, yeah,
I can totally relate.
yeah.
Yes. Wow. So, is there anything else that you want to add on before we can just wrap it up?
um, I'm trying to think what else would I add? I would want to encourage everyone to please consider becoming seizure first aid certified. You can go on epilepsy.com and find out about live trainings. They have on demand trainings for seizure first aid. And so I would really encourage everyone to become seizure first aid certified. It The knowledge that you gain about epilepsy um, is it's a really well done course that was put together and made available for free.
Remember, guys, anyone who has a brain can
Can
have a
have a
seizure.
seizure. Yep.
And that is very thought provoking and
Hmm.
something for all of us to really consider. It could be any of us. So it is important that we pay attention to those, uh, my brain again.
Yep.
Pay attention to those warnings. Pay attention to the be educated
Be
about
educated.
epilepsy.
Yeah.
Educate yourself. And when I come on here, I care about people. I care about people. And that is why I feel that there's a need for me to come up here and to help educate the public about such awareness, such health issues, because each one teach one.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's important.
Yes.
Yeah.
And let's touch and reach as many people as we can. Like I said, I told Joycelyn, I told her I am open to anything that you want to talk about when it comes to respects of
Mhm.
epilepsy. You can use my platform
Thank you.
because we can those people you don't know, I know, and those people I don't know, you know. So it is important.
Mhm.
Important
Mhm.
that. So I really appreciate you taking the time out. I know you're still at work. You gotta go
Thank
home to your
you.
family.
I'm on my way. Thank
Yes. So
you for the
I do
invitation.
appreciate you. Have a good night. And before you go, what's for dinner tonight? You know I'm gonna ask you about food. What
I
is
will
it?
say that my it's late. It's very late for dinner. But my husband made some lentil soup, and that's what I'm going to have.
So you know I'm gonna go to the next question. Is that your favorite food or do you have a favorite food?
It's not my favorite food. I right now what's in my head is watermelon. I love watermelon, and watermelon season is over. I love melons actually, but watermelon is my favorite. But you can still get cantaloupes, but you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Watermelon are plentiful right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I eat watermelon, but it's not one of my favorite
Is
fruits.
not what's your favorite?
Well, we have something back home. She said
By
I
the
made
way, I was in your country. I didn't know you were from St. Lucia. I was in your country last year. My husband and I celebrated our anniversary there.
awesome, awesome. No, I go to the kitchen to take care of the bread. There's a fruit that I really love in our country. They call it sugar apples. Now
Hmm.
I love mangoes, but they call it sugar apples. It's this little fruit and it has the seeds in it, and it is sweet. I love sugar apples and I've missed it. And there's something called golden apples and grapes. Oh my gosh, don't even get me started.
I'm gonna look up sugar apples.
Yes, you gotta look. You gotta try it. You gotta try it even one time in your lifetime. You when the next time you go back to Saint Lucia, look for sugar apples.
Okay, okay. I
All right,
will.
my love. Well, thank you so much for being here on Poetry and Perspective with Placid. It is an honor. It is always a pleasure for you to grace my presence. Most importantly, it is the information that you gave us tonight is very valuable, and I'm sure someone somewhere is going to benefit from it. If not, if they have not been benefiting yet from that talk we had done, because I learned a lot tonight. And continue the good work that you do. When you are amazing, you have a very nice personality, and you have the most contagious smile. And have a good night. I tell your husband I said thank you for lending us for an hour. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
You have a
Okay. I'm
great
okay.
night too.
You so we'll talk soon. Okay. Good
All right.
night. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Risers. Thank you so much for being on Poetry and Perspective with Placide. Remember, we are going to go for so many different challenges in life, and there's so many of us that's facing so much in this lifetime. It is important that we speak up so that we can get the help that we need. Like I said, each one teach one. And we may endeavor to embark on so many different things in our lifetimes, and we are going to fail before we can even really succeed. But like I always quote Les Brown, if you are going to fall, don't you ever give up on your dreams. And if you are going to fall, make sure that you land on your back, because once you can look up, you can get up. We all have that power within us to change our lives, to be better people than we were yesterday, and better people than we were tomorrow than we were today. So continue putting up a fight to be the best person that you can be. Do not let the evil conquer the good. Keep rising up. Rise up, rise to your own prosperity. And that could be spiritual, it could be physical, it could be financial or personal. Whatever that is for you, keep rising, keep soaring, keep putting in your best foot forward. Never give up on yourself. One day, that dream, that goal is going to be accomplished. Never ever let failure be your finality. Until next time, have a good night. I love you all. Once again, this is Cindy Placid with Poetry and Perspective with Placid. I'll see you soon. Good night.